From age 12 to 30, Jesus disappears completely. The Gospels go silent. No miracles, no teachings, no record. 18 years of the Son of God's life, just gone. Where was Jesus for almost 2 decades, and what was he doing? This isn't some minor gap. This is most of his earthly life. The same man who would walk on water, raise the dead, and redeem all of humanity, vanishes from Scripture for 18 years. Hidden years, divine mystery. Some say he traveled to India learning from Buddhist monks. Others claim he studied with the Essenes in the desert. Ancient texts even suggest he went to Egypt, Britain, or Tibet. But what does Scripture actually tell us? And why does the silence speak louder than words? Today, we're going to examine every theory, every claim, and every piece of evidence. Because what happened during those missing years reveals something profound about who Jesus really was. The Great Silence. Let's start with what we actually know. Luke chapter 2 gives us our last childhood glimpse of Jesus. He's 12 years old, sitting in the temple in Jerusalem, astounding the teachers with his understanding. Mary and Joseph finally find him after 3 days of searching. And then, nothing. Luke simply writes, and Jesus increased in wisdom and stature, and in favor with God and man. That's it. One verse to cover 18 years. The next time we see Jesus, he's 30 years old, walking to the Jordan River to be baptized by John, from child to man with nothing in between. Why would the gospel writers, who meticulously recorded 3 years of Jesus' ministry, say absolutely nothing about the previous 18? Some argue this silence is intentional. Others believe crucial texts were lost or suppressed. But here's what most people miss. The silence itself is a message. And understanding why Scripture goes quiet reveals something powerful about how God works in hiddenness before he works in public. The Nazareth theory. The simplest explanation is often the truest. Jesus likely spent those 18 years exactly where you'd expect, in Nazareth working as a carpenter. Matthew 13:55 tells us the townspeople knew him as the carpenter's son. Mark 6:3 goes further, calling Jesus himself the carpenter. In first-century Jewish culture, a son learned his father's trade. Joseph was a tekton, a Greek word meaning craftsman or builder. Carpenter, builder, craftsman. Jesus would have spent years learning to work with his hands, shaping wood, building homes, creating with the same hands that would later heal lepers and break bread for 5,000. Think about that. The creator of the universe, through whom all things were made, spent most of his earthly life doing manual labor in an insignificant village. If this truth is opening your eyes to something deeper, hit like and subscribe for more biblical wisdom that transforms. Because there's a reason God chose hiddenness before greatness, and it applies directly to your life. But what about those who claim Jesus traveled far beyond Nazareth? The India legend. In 1894, a Russian journalist named Nicholas Notovich claimed he discovered something extraordinary. While visiting a Buddhist monastery in Tibet, monks allegedly showed him an ancient manuscript called the Life of Saint Issa. According to this text, Jesus traveled to India at age 13, studied with Hindu Brahmins, learned meditation techniques, and became a Buddhist teacher before returning to Palestine. The story spread like wildfire through spiritualist circles. It seemed to answer everything. But here's the problem. No scholar has ever independently verified this manuscript exists. When other researchers visited the same monastery, the monks denied any knowledge of it. Notovich's account contains historical errors that a genuine ancient text wouldn't have. And most importantly, nothing in the Gospels suggests Jesus had any contact with Eastern philosophy. His teachings are thoroughly Jewish, rooted in Torah and the prophets. The India theory appeals to those who want to harmonize all religions, but the evidence simply isn't there. Yet this isn't the only exotic claim about Jesus' missing years. The Essene connection. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1947, everything changed. Suddenly, we had proof of a Jewish sect living in the desert near Qumran, practicing ritual purity, studying scripture intensively, and awaiting a Messiah. Some scholars immediately connected Jesus to the Essenes. John the Baptist, with his desert lifestyle and apocalyptic preaching, seemed like an Essene prototype. Could Jesus have trained with them? Scrolls, Desert Secrets. The parallels are intriguing. Both Jesus and the Essenes emphasize spiritual purity over temple sacrifice. Both awaited God's kingdom. Both practiced communal living. But the differences are equally striking. The Essenes were rigid isolationists. Jesus ate with sinners and tax collectors. The Essenes had strict purity rules. Jesus touched lepers and healed on the Sabbath. I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Jesus broke every Essene rule about separation. While he may have known of the Essenes, his ministry was their opposite. But there's another theory that takes Jesus even further from home. The Egypt mystery. We know Jesus went to Egypt as an infant. Matthew 2:14 tells us Joseph fled there with Mary and the child to escape Herod's massacre. But did Jesus return later? Some theorists propose that Jesus spent his hidden years studying in Egyptian mystery schools, learning ancient wisdom from the priests of Alexandria. Egypt had been a center of learning for millennia. The famous Library of Alexandria contained scrolls from across the known world. Jewish communities thrived there, and Philo of Alexandria was developing his influential philosophy at this very time. Could Jesus have absorbed this knowledge? The theory sounds appealing, but Scripture is clear. After Herod died, the family returned to Israel and settled in Nazareth. He went and lived in a town called Nazareth. Matthew connects this to prophecy. He shall be called a Nazarene. There's no scriptural evidence Jesus ever returned to Egypt, and his teachings show no trace of Egyptian mystery religion. Yet perhaps the most surprising theory takes Jesus to the opposite end of the ancient world. The Britain legend. This one might shock you. An ancient British tradition claims Jesus visited the British Isles, possibly with his great-uncle Joseph of Arimathea, who traded in Cornish tin. The legend suggests Jesus walked the green hills of England, even building a small wattle church at Glastonbury. The hymn Jerusalem immortalizes this myth. William Blake wrote, "And did those feet in ancient time walk upon England's mountains green?" It's a beautiful image. The Son of God visiting the misty shores of Britain. But we need to be honest. Legend, not history. There is absolutely zero historical evidence for this claim. The tradition doesn't appear until medieval times, over 1,000 years after Jesus lived. It likely arose from British Christians wanting a special connection to Christ. The tin trade between Palestine and Britain did exist. Joseph of Arimathea was wealthy enough to own a tomb, but the leap from could have to did requires evidence we simply don't have. So if Jesus wasn't traveling the world, what was he actually doing? The hidden purpose. Here's what most people miss entirely. The silence about Jesus' hidden years isn't a problem to solve. It's the point. In Jewish culture, a man couldn't begin public ministry until age 30. This wasn't arbitrary. It was the age of full maturity, the age when Levites began temple service, the age when Joseph became ruler of Egypt and David became king. Now Jesus himself began his ministry at about 30 years of age. God follows his own timing. Those 18 years weren't wasted. They were preparation. Jesus learned obedience through ordinary life. He experienced hunger, fatigue, frustration, and joy. He knew what it meant to work for wages, to deal with difficult customers, to lose a father. The hidden years made him fully human, while remaining fully God. Hebrews 4:15 says he was tempted in every way we are, yet without sin. When did that testing happen? In the wilderness, yes, but also in the workshop, in the daily grind, in the obscurity, and this reveals something crucial about your own journey, the family life. Scripture tells us something profound that most overlook. Jesus had brothers and sisters. Matthew 13:55-56 names his brothers, James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas. It mentions sisters too, plural. This was a full household. When Joseph died, likely during Jesus' teenage years, guess who became responsible? The eldest son. Is this not the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary? Jesus wasn't just learning a trade. He was providing for a family. He was the breadwinner, the protector. The one who made sure his mother and siblings had food, shelter, and safety. Think about the weight of that. The King of Kings spent his 20s doing exactly what millions of ordinary people do, working to support those he loved, and his brothers didn't even believe in him. John 7:5 is painfully clear, for even his own brothers did not believe in him. Jesus lived for years with people who thought he was nothing special. That's preparation you can't get from mystery schools. But there's one more dimension to consider: the synagogue years. When Jesus stood up in the Nazareth synagogue and read from Isaiah, something remarkable happened. He read in Hebrew. He interpreted with authority. He knew exactly where to find the passage. Scholar, rabbi, teacher. This wasn't accidental. Jewish boys began Torah study at age 5. By 13, they celebrated bar mitzvah and were responsible for keeping the commandments. But learning didn't stop there. The brightest students continued studying with rabbis, memorizing vast portions of scripture, debating interpretation, mastering the oral traditions. Jesus clearly received this education. Luke 2:46-47 shows him at 12 sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone was amazed at his understanding. Where did this man get this wisdom? The answer: years of study, years of meditation on the Word, years of sitting in synagogue every Sabbath hearing scripture read and taught. Jesus didn't need Buddhist wisdom or Egyptian mysteries. He had the Torah, he had the prophets, he had his Father, and that was enough. Which brings us to the most important lesson of all: your hidden season. Here's what the missing years really teach us. Hiddenness precedes greatness. Before Moses led Israel out of Egypt, he spent 40 years in the desert tending sheep. Before David became king, he spent years fleeing Saul in caves. Before Paul transformed the world, he spent 3 years in Arabia in obscurity. And before Jesus changed everything, he spent 18 years in a carpenter's shop. You might be in your hidden season right now, working a job nobody celebrates, raising children nobody applauds, waiting for a calling that hasn't come. Faithfulness in obscurity is the foundation for fruitfulness in visibility. God is doing something in you before he does something through you. The hidden years aren't wasted years. They're preparation years. He who is faithful in little will be faithful in much. Jesus didn't need exotic travels to become who he was. He needed faithfulness in Nazareth. And so do you. So where was Jesus for those 18 years? The evidence points to exactly where you'd least expect the Son of God to be. In an ordinary village, doing ordinary work, with ordinary people who didn't believe in him. Hidden, faithful, ready. No mystical travels, no secret teachings. Just a carpenter learning obedience through the things he suffered. And here's the beautiful truth: those hidden years make Jesus more relatable, not less. He knows what it's like to wait, to work, to be overlooked, to prepare for something greater while living in the mundane. The God who created galaxies spent decades in obscurity, so you would never feel alone in yours. If you made it this far, comment Nazareth faithful if you're ready to trust God in your own hidden season. Stay in the Word, stay in the Spirit, and watch what God does. If this opened your eyes, hit like and subscribe. Share it with someone in their waiting season. See you in the next one.